Chapter 10. Seer stared at Medic Solemn, trying to hide his surprise. Solemn's 3D image hovered over Seer's comp station as he waited for the man to speak. One of the young man's eyes had been swollen shut, and a deep bruise marred that side of his face. "How soon will Elder Medic Steady be finished?" Seer asked, feeling uneasy.
"Just a moment."
He cleared his throat.
"But while we wait, he wanted me to, warn you."
Seer inclined his head. "I've already seen that most of the Earth females are fighting their kidnapping. As they should. As I would."
"No, sir,"
he said, the black markings on his face expanding to show his embarrassment.
"It's, rather an, issue with the reaction of the healing chambers and their...
Seer rubbed his forehead. "Spit it out, kid. I've had too long of a night for this." The human's kiss had impacted Seer in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd found himself exiting his room over and over throughout the night to stare at her in the healing chamber, reminding himself that she had been drugged out of her mind when she kissed him. But still, he couldn't let it go. Or sleep. Even the thought of her made his body ache. "What are you trying to say, Solemn?" Seer asked, trying to distract himself from the thought of the tiny human just a few feet behind him. The young man gave an audible sigh.
"It seems to, arouse the females."
Seer slowly dropped his hand and looked up, meeting the other male's gaze. "What do you mean?" Solemn's tattoos expanded further.
"Both of the females that required my healing woke from their chambers, and, their chosen mates did not appreciate their immediate interest in me."
"Really?" he replied flatly. "So that's it." His chest felt oddly hollow. "She kissed me because of a chemical reaction. It was science and nothing more." Seer cleared his throat. "Thank you for the warning." Solemn looked relieved.
"How is Parsimon's bride-to-be?"
He chose his words with care, not wanting to panic the young man with the implications of finding a human female with the rewire contagion. "She has extensive damage in her brain. Her treatment will require days, if not weeks."
"May the pregnant mother watch over her."
The young man murmured the prayer, shaking his head. "From your lips to her ears," Seer responded customarily. A second later, the young man's face twisted, and the face of Elder Medic Steady replaced the younger man's.
"I'm told you wanted to speak with me."
"Everything will change from this moment on." "Yes." Seer held his gaze. "The young woman in my care has been infected by the rewire contagion." His bushy gray brows rose so high they disappeared into his short gray hair.
"If this is some kind of sick joke..."
"I wish it was." He didn't speak for a painfully long moment.
"May the pregnant mother help us."
Steady's markings had paled to a gray nearly as light as his hair.
"How is this even possible?"
"I don't know, but I intend to keep her isolated until her system is free of it, as well as discover the source of her initial infection." The older male nodded.
"And none of the other females show signs of infection?"
"None that have been reported." He shook his head.
"I'll have my men run blood work on the females every 24 hours until we return to Ungar. If anyone else has contracted it, I will send them to your medbay for treatment."
"There will be more. There always is. We may have to keep them quarantined for the full 7 days on the ship. It won't be safe to bring them home, even if there is the slightest risk of reintroducing the contagion to the population." Steady's lip curled.
"Well, that shouldn't be a problem, given that we are headed away from the wormhole."
"Away? What possible reason could Leader have for that? We should be returning these females to the males eagerly awaiting them back home. This can't be good." But he kept his thoughts to himself. Better to ask his friend Leader rather than add to the crew's sense of unease. A soft noise came from behind him. The human was waking. "I must go." He waved his hand through the image and the other male faded, then rose from his seat in front of the comm station and passed the 2 empty healing chambers. The young woman tossed her head, a frown curving her pale lips. Freezing a few feet from her, he regarded her for another moment, both fascination and hesitation warring within him. Who knew how long the rewire contagion had been attacking her brain, seeping her of life day after day? She had been so thin that he had programmed the healing bunk to administer an emergency starvation protocol. It had been only a day and a morning, but already he thought he might see slightly more color to her pale cheeks. He cleared his throat and her eyes fluttered open. He closed the space between them, keeping his strides measured. "How do you feel? Will she hit me? Scream? Or kiss me again?" His body tightened. "Do not hope for that. It will hurt all the more when Parsimon comes to claim her." Her blue eyes looked wide and clear as the Intaga oceans, reminding him yet again of how closely she resembled the female in his vision. She licked her lips.
Smell,
"Smell," he repeated. Did I hear her right?
need to shower.
Her gaze met his, pupils still far too dilated from the pain medications. "Huh?" He stepped back. "After everything you've been through, you're worried about how you smell?" She wrinkled her nose, then gave a ghost of a grin.
Yes.
"Well, cleanliness is always a benefit when recovering from illness." He mentally kicked himself, stopped pretending. An image came to him of her bathing. His breath caught. She raised her arms and they trembled a little. He found he couldn't refuse her. Leaning down, he swept her into his arms and moved through the med bay toward his private chamber. The doors parted and he carried her to the separate privacy room. Bathing pool or shower? "Computer, fill the bathing pool." Instantly, the massive round tub in the center of the room filled with the sound of rushing water. While he waited, his gaze strayed back to her. Blood still matted her blonde hair and stained part of her face. The uniform material she wore felt stiff. She has already been through so much. "I shall leave you here and bring a change of clothes."
No.
She whispered.
Please, don't.
He frowned. Are the many meds running through her impacting her logical thought? She might already be moments from sliding back into sleep.
Stay with me.
She reached up, touching the marking on his left cheek in an intimate gesture. His heart raced. That would not be wise. No male should see her like this except her mate. Only he chose to remain safely at home, sending me to fetch her like cargo, an angry voice whispered in the back of his mind. If he were here, he could care for her as she needs to be. She should not suffer for his lack of interest.
Please.
She begged him, her nose wrinkling.
You are a doctor, and I feel disgusting.
Reminded of his duty, he closed his eyes, willing himself not to think of this woman as anything but a patient. All right. But I will not breach the lines of chivalry again. My kiss was enough of a mistake. We will wear our clothes while she bathes. Holding her more tightly, he struggled out of his boots. She nestled against his chest, causing the air to rush in and out of his lungs at a faster pace. He gritted his teeth, then knelt down, sitting, then sliding into the blue gel-like waters, with her still in his arms. She gasped as the warm gel came up to her chest. Eyes wide, she stared at him.
What is this?
The gel began to work, rubbing against them, scrubbing the dirt from their skin. The look of panic faded from her expression, replaced by one of pleasure.
My imagination has never been quite this creative.
He shifted, shocked by the way he responded to the sight of her, mouth slightly open, head slowly lolling back. He had been attracted to females before, but never has he lost control so easily. Settling more deeply in the waters, her hair dipped into it, and he watched as the dirty, blood-stained strands changed color. When she sat up slightly, her locks were as golden blonde as his own. Stunning. He loosened his grip on her, letting the cleaning gel sink over everything but her face. Then gently, he let her sink beneath the waters. Her eyes opened and she bolted into a sitting position. Even though she had been beneath the gel for only a moment, the blood had already been cleaned from most of her ivory skin. Unable to help himself, he reached up to wipe specks from her cheeks, only to discover it didn't wipe away. It was a part of her, another surprise. She smiled, a slight movement that transformed her from beautiful to breathtaking.
I never imagined death to be like this, to finally bring me everything I didn't have in life.
Death? Does she think... Before he could finish his thought, she kissed him. Again. And again, all logic faded in the presence of her touch.